Structure's good.
Structure is really good. That's what Iman told me. He's like, Dr. Jones likes structure. I'm like, all right.
He is correct.
Yeah, I actually just reshot with him yesterday. He came down over the weekend and hung out a little bit. Had some cornbread. Have you ever had the?
I have not.
It's a. If you like barbecue, it's actually really good.
Okay.
They got like brisket, burnt ends, all that kind of stuff. But tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, a little bit about me. So my name is Phillip Jones. I grew up on a farm in Maryland. I got kind of interested in technology from kind of seeing my dad fix things on the farm. He's a mechanic also, so he can look at how engines work. My mom was big into sci-fi, so really liked to see kind of space technology and stuff. So that kind of motivated me to go into like the engineering field. After graduating high school, I attended undergrad at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in electrical engineering, and got my master's from University of Illinois also in electrical engineering, and then eventually made my way to WashU in St. Louis, Missouri, and got my PhD in computer engineering. And then from 2008 onwards, I've been at Iowa State University.
So you graduate with your bachelor's in electrical, then you got your master's in computer engineering.
Undergrad, master's in electrical,
Okay.
and PhD in
PhD
computer.
in computer. Okay.
Yep.
So was there something that happened that you're like, electrical is not for me, I want to switch more to computer?
So very similar to Iowa State University. At University of Illinois, if you're a double E, electrical engineer, and like computers, you can kind of take electives that make you look a lot more like a computer engineer. And then for your master's, even as a double E, you can take a lot of electives that would make you look like a computer engineer. So as an undergrad, I actually took quite a bit of computer engineering electives, same for double E. So for me, it didn't really feel like I was switching from double E to computer E. I've always kind of been both.
Yeah, you're just in the best of both worlds.
That's how I like to look at it. I did about 10 internships with Intel Corporation.
Wow. 10 of them?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I was fortunate that my summer after my freshman year, I got on a Intel scholarship / internship.
Yeah, that's big.
And that kind of, after my third internship, my manager said, you need to choose, do you want to take a double E path or a computer E path? And I'm like, I will do both. And so I like doing both.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool how you make it work out. And I mean, 10 internships. So how long were those internships?
Most were 3 months. I had one that was broken into 2 pieces, but basically was about a year and a half between my master's and PhD.
Yeah.
So it's a good chance I might have the world record for most internships at Intel. So it's quite possible.
Yeah. You still have a lot of friends that work there?
I'm sure I know people that work there, but I have not been in close contact over the last couple years, I would say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's understandable. I mean, you're so busy with your research and teachings at Iowa State. But so, I guess, what made you want to go into academia?
So my plan was to initially get my PhD and work for like Intel Corporation and do research there. But throughout my life, I've always been someone that likes to help like the other kids in class learn stuff. So I can remember back in 3rd grade, people struggling with long division. I'm like, I would sit and help people learn how to do it and stuff. And I was always someone in undergrad and for my master's and PhD that if I was in the computer lab or any type of lab and saw people struggling, I would go and try to give them some pointers of how to work through stuff. And with about 1 year left of my PhD, one of those grad students, master students I was helping in the lab came up my office for some help. And they said that I should think about being a professor because I tend to be very patient and I'm very good at explaining things. I was like, okay, I'll consider it. And then I'm at Iowa State University. So it just seemed to be a nice fit. Also, as a professor, you get a lot of flexibility where you can kind of work on whatever you want.
Yeah.
As long as you can write grants and people are willing to fund you to do your work, you can work whatever you want research-wise.
Yeah. So I guess looking back at kind of your earlier education, like let's say middle school, high school, are there any classes that you had that were really tech-related that you're like, this is it, this is what I want to do?
That's interesting. I would say that just in general, throughout like kindergarten through high school, like I was always big on math. Over the summertime, if I go into like a store, there'd be like a little math workbook to learn about the next grade's mathematics. I want to get one of those to play with at home.
Yeah.
So I always just enjoyed anything that was math or science, like science class, first day of class in any grade. First thing I would do is open the book up to the very back where the stuff about space was, and I would learn about space. In my physics book, I would flip to the back, and that's where the stuff about theory of relativity was. So I was always about trying to kind of push the boundaries of my knowledge of what humans know. And I think undergrad or so, I think my goal was to kind of be what I called a theoretical engineer. So an engineer that would look at what the scientists are trying to prove as theories and say, okay, how can I build a machine to either see if the theory is true or false? That's kind of that interested me. And being in kind of computer and electrical engineering, you kind of have those skill sets to kind of build those types of things up.
So do you think, you said your mom was very interested in like sci-fi and stuff.
Yep.
Do you think she was a big driving factor in your life to go towards that kind of thing?
I think very much so. I think this her joy of like Star Trek and Star Wars, and both my parents were very supportive of me going out and kind of just trying to go after the things I showed initiative to pursue. So
Yeah.
they definitely played a big role in giving me the support to kind of go after stuff.
No, that's very fortunate. It's like not everyone has the ability to do that, or some parents are like for instance, originally I would just want to be in a band. My mom was like, "You're too smart to be in a band. Just go to college." And here I am about to graduate this semester, but it all works out because like you can be in a band and have a real job or whatever. But so you were saying you like to chase like theories and stuff. Be like, oh, is this theory true or false? So did you have like an at-home like MythBusters lab, or how did that go?
I did not. So it's one of those things that I was always interested in. So I love the MythBusters, but I think my career's never gone to that path of really like looking at okay, does string theory work or not. So I've not done stuff like that. So it's been much more incremental steps of stuff that I look at. Like most professors, we kind of like pose simpler questions, make experiments, and try to push the envelope further a little bit.
Yeah. So what would you say your favorite experiment was?
So I would say that when we do quote unquote experiments in computer often it's more of like, for example, in my field, I look at like hardware acceleration. So how can you look at certain applications, like let's say, for example, I had a team of students looking at bioinformatics. So the idea of looking at DNA, analyzing the DNA, and trying to like learn something about the DNA or constructing like the sequencing of DNA. And back when students did this, like it might take, I don't know, a couple of days to kind of do the sequencing. And then they proposed an architecture to try to take it from like a couple of days to like a couple of minutes type deal. So speed it up by like 10,000 times faster.
Wow.
So the experiments we would do is like, here's our proposed architecture, let's prototype it up, run data through it, see how much speed up we get. So that's kind of the realm that I tend to work in.
So so you had a group of students working for you. Was this like a senior design project or?
That particular example started out as, for one of my classes, graduate level course, there was this design competition that happened in March, and it lasted a month. And it lined up just right with my spring course. So the month of March, the whole class was dedicated to the class breaking up into different teams and all competing in this competition for a month.
Nice.
And that particular year, the competition was looking at doing basically DNA sequencing and assembling the DNA back together.
Yeah. How many teams were there?
That particular year, I think there may have been, three teams.
Were you really hands-on with them, or were you just like, here's your scope of view, go for it?
Typically what I like to do at the graduate level especially is kind of like tell them to go for it, but at the same time, I try to really kind of advise as they move forward and they run into issues and try to debug stuff.
Yeah, so you're just like, just big brother, just be like, if you need anything, I'm here.
Yep.
But
exactly.
Otherwise, you're free to do however you feel it's going to be best completed.
Yep.
That's
exactly.
neat.
And,
Yeah.
and most students love the competition of trying to compete against like other people in the country and stuff. So usually pretty fun.
Well, especially when you're in a graduate level course, it's not like you're just being fed to the wolves or anything. It's like, you have a firm foundation of what you know or what you don't know and what you need to learn.
Exactly.
And working with other, how many people on a team?
Typically for that class, I think it was like teams of like maybe 4. So it's usually a kind of very niche
Yeah.
graduate course. So those classes tend to be a bit smaller than
Right.
like the
Like a 288.
undergraduate. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. What made you, were you just thrown into that class, or what made you want to teach 288?
Um, Interesting. So in a sense, I was kind of just thrown in there. I definitely enjoyed the material, but I would say that my experience with microcontrollers before 288 was probably very small. Like I have the skill set to build a microcontroller, but didn't really use it in my daily life. So when I first got kind of signed up for 288, I was initially signed up to be only in the lab. So my very first semester, I was just in the lab, and that was pretty good because I could kind of learn about the microcontroller in the lab like the week before students would. And I kind of fell in love with the microcontroller they used, which was the same one used for Arduinos. It was the same type of microcontroller essentially.
Yeah.
And it was like reading a fun novel looking at the data sheets. Like I enjoyed like learning that material so much in the lab that I was very happy to then switch over to doing the main lecturing stuff the next year.
So did you have kind of like a mentor professor to help you be like, hey, here's kind of how you run this class?
So my first couple years and how 288 kind of used to run the embedded systems class was that it was such a big course that you would have like one professor do lecture for like the morning section and one professor do the afternoon section. So I was kind of paired up with someone who's taught the course many times. So I kind of had their lecture sides to kind of start with and then kind of modify them, make them my own as things went along.
Yeah. I think that's probably the best way to do it, really. Just so it's like, if you need help or something, or just need advice for like, well, how can I teach this subject or little topic better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree completely. And I was fortunate because when I was teaching 288, there were 2 other professors that would typically teach it. So sometimes I would be paired up with one professor, sometimes with the other professor. And those 2 other professors each had their kind of own focus areas they focused on, because 288 covers a lot of stuff and you can kind of focus on different things. And it really helped me take what I wanted to focus on, and I'm always big on trying to incorporate other people's way of doing things. So I try to take what they do and improve myself. So I got a lot of nice new ideas of how to teach the course and to really try to think about what students might find useful when they get out into the workforce. So trying to bring those concepts into the course.
Yeah. This is just my experience with Iowa State. I would say the CPRE faculty, all the professors I've had are A teachers. I mean, this is my best experience here. I would say, though they've been the hardest classes I've taken, but that's kind of the point. It's like you want the good teachers teaching the more difficult subjects. Like you're a great professor for 288, and that honestly, I want to go into embedded systems. I'm actually having an interview with BAE on March 1st.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, Iman put in a good word for me, but
okay.
It all helps.
Yeah,
but
Iman's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. If I'd love to do it just because there's military defense contracting, and you're going to be able to work with a lot of cool things and do a lot of cool projects. But speaking of projects, what would you say out of Iowa State, like not including it, what has been your favorite project you got to work on that's not blocked by like an NDA?
Yeah. So I guess to have 2 directions. A kind of favorite project I had was, so often we'll do projects that are funded by the National Science Foundation, which have the purpose of trying to kind of push human knowledge forward a little bit. So in that sense, those kind of deliverables can feel a little more abstract. But I had one project with John Deere. So when you work with a company, typically it's much more concrete exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty fun project. We did stuff with automating some of their vehicles using computer vision technology. So using computers to look at the world around you and detect objects and track objects and stuff like that. So that was a pretty fun project to actually see kind of be deployed out in the real world. Kind of in my more kind of standard projects, I've been leaning back to some of my double E electrical engineering roots with control systems. So looking how to take kind of advanced mathematics, deploy them onto things like tiny little quadcopters, and then give them advanced capabilities to be able to do more aggressive maneuvers and stuff. So a lot of
That's
times,
neat.
yeah, a lot of times most quadcopters and stuff have like little simple controllers on them because they have very strict weight requirements. If you have like a quadcopter, like super tiny one,
Yeah.
you have like a little tiny microcontroller on it. So I have been doing research and having teams work on trying to basically put FPGAs on little quadcopters and be able to really beef up their capabilities in terms of doing mathematics for control applications.
Is that more tied in with like the 488 class?
Very tightly tied in. I try to tie my research back to my teaching when I can. So I actually have, the last couple of years, had a senior design team that's been, as part of their senior design project, developing quadcopter laboratories for 488 students to execute and perform.
Yeah. I wanted to take that class, but it's like I just can't. I don't have that amount of motivation left in me for college. This is my 5th year of college because I transferred from Eastern Iowa Community College, and just to get a bachelor's is like I just want to work. Like I'll probably come back and get a master's if it's sponsored by a company, of course. But it's like I don't have unlimited money. It's like I gotta get some, and then yeah. But no, so what other embedded systems classes are there other than like 288 and 488 here?
I would say 288 and 48 are the main like core embedded systems courses. There's one that's kind of called embedded systems, which is CPRE 388, and that one is embedded systems in the sense that you kind of do things on an embedded platform like a smart device, but it's really not connected to 288 and 488. Classes that I would say are tightly related to embedded systems would be like your computer architecture course, 381.
Yeah.
And real-time systems, which is 580 something, I think. 540 something, 543 maybe. But the real-time systems course is another one that's very, very tightly coupled to embedded systems. A little less coupled, but still related would be like fault-tolerant systems, which is like a grad course.
That's one of your research areas, isn't it?
One of my research areas is, I would say, one of my research interests. So research areas would be places that you kind of very actively are doing research.
Right.
Interests are things where you might do a paper there every once in a while. And for me, fault-tolerant systems is in the area of interest, strong interest, because my master's degree thesis was on fault-tolerant systems. So kind of my background after undergrad kind of shifted into kind of fault tolerance. I had a little break during my 10 internships with Intel Corporation, where I interned with Jet Propulsion Lab, NASA, and was able to do my master's thesis on fault tolerance like at JPL. So that was pretty cool.
That is nice. So what made you want to do a thesis on fault tolerant systems?
It linked nicely to some of my vision I had as a senior in high school. I envisioned that I wanted to get a degree where I could do space technology and kind of develop spacecraft that could last for like hundreds of years. If they're going to last that long, they need to be able to adapt when bad things happen. So when I got to my master's, I tried to find ways to kind of work my way into that area a bit. And that's when I first got introduced to the concept of field programmable gate arrays, so FPGAs. So these are chips that have the capability that as they're running, you actually can change the internal hardware as it's running for things like fault tolerance. So that's kind of how I got into the realm of fault tolerance, was down that path.
So do you do a lot of that type of work at JPL?
So I was there for one summer, and during that summer, my master's thesis, which was the same work they wanted to do at JPL, was to do what's called fault tolerance evaluation. So the idea is that you put a expensive chip into space, it gets hits with radiation, that causes errors to happen, the software needs to recover from the errors. And in order to kind of test the different types of mechanisms they put in place to be tolerant of errors, one approach they can take is that on Earth, they can take a chip, they could put next to a radiation source, hit it with radiation, cause internal errors, and see how the software reacts.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so they can do that. The problem is, once you physically irradiate the chip and you break it, you can't use that chip anymore. So,
Yeah.
so
how do you go about finding that fine line?
Yeah, so one approach was what my master's thesis did was extend another PhD student's thesis, which was to emulate hardware faults using software. So the approach we took was that most microprocessors have a capability to go into a debugging mode. So as the processor is running at full speed, you basically put a special instruction in there that says go into debug mode, and then within a couple microseconds, you can flip a few bits in registers without like breaking anything, and then start back up after like a microsecond. That way the application can't really tell it was stopped, but things change just like it would change if radiation hit it. So it's called software-based hardware fault emulation, essentially.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so some of the tests we would do is like they would give us like images that would come down from Mars, and then run it through object detection, and then we would inject faults to see if we could break the kind of object detection algorithms. Then the NASA people would have specialized algorithms to kind of be able to deal with the faults, so they still get the right answer.
So did some of your thesis conclusion get put into like real world working products?
So I would say that year, this is like many eons ago when I did that, but they were at that point. Jet Propulsion Lab was looking at like 3 different technologies for emulating these faults, and one of my jobs was to work on my thesis was emulating faults, but also to help evaluate 2 other techniques. So I was kind of a person trying to basically help them evaluate the systems, and then for they could make a decision on what path they wanted to take for doing their evaluations.
So that just whole thing just sparked you like, okay, fault tolerances, that's awesome.
Yeah. The concept of being able to recover from errors is a very interesting thing. And beyond FPGAs, there are other things I learned about my first semester of grad school where it's like before AI was big, there's some like people might have a prosthetic arm, right? Because they lose an arm, have a prosthetic arm, and often with the kind of the original ones, it might take a few months for someone to learn how to use the prosthetic arm. And the paper I was reading was, okay, here's a prosthetic arm that's smart enough that this prosthetic arm learns you. So instead of you learning that, so instead of taking like 3 months to use it, you can use it like after a week type deal. So I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's neat.
Yeah, so the technology is like called evolvable hardware. So hardware that can kind of learn and evolve based off inputs. So that type of stuff got me kind of interested down that path.
So this is just all theory. Like if let's say I didn't have an arm and then I needed to get, an arm that learned how I had used it, whatever, and then I just gave it to you, and then how long would it take to like learn you after learning me?
So that's something that there's actually like the cutting edge prosthetics and stuff now, like that's what it does. It basically uses machine learning algorithms to kind of look at the neurons firing at the edge of where your kind of stump is, and then it kind of does the machine learning process. So
that's crazy.
So I wouldn't, off the top of my head, if I had to make a gut guess, I would say maybe after definitely I think under a week that you can get a new one, plug it into someone, and they're starting to use it, to be my guess.
So I haven't done a whole lot of research into these things, but it's like how effective is it compared to like a normal arm?
I don't have good insight on that. I would say one thing's for certain is that the performance and how well they behave is probably increasing exponentially fast. Like this, the technology.
Yeah,
for
just
AI
like
stuff.
Moore's law.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's wherever it is now, it's going to be way better in the near future.
Yeah, like so. Speaking of just increasing technology, one interesting thing Ivan pointed out to me is that you didn't have like a lot of personal new technology or whatever that you used.
Yes, this is a true statement.
Why is that?
I like things that just work, and I like things that have their own purposes. So it used to be when I was in 288, not sure if I did when I was in your class, but I would take out my phone, say, here's my not so smart phone.
Yeah, I think I remember that, yeah.
And this is an upgrade from what I used to have. So I like to have phones that are used for calling people. I like to have a camera. So for people who have not seen such things, a camera that's used for taking pictures. Yeah, so I'm big on kind of keeping things simple. Like my car does not have GPS. If I need to find some place, I will first look it up. I'll use the technology of the internet and I will sketch a map out by hand, and I will use that to go where I'm going. It's interesting, a few years ago, I had a student that turned a homework assignment in late. And their reason was because they were returning from a trip someplace, their GPS stopped working, and they couldn't use a map to figure out how to get places. They're like, I don't know how to use this map thing. I gave them an extension, but I thought it was interesting that that a lot of people, if their GPS turns off, they can't get from point A to point B anymore. So I'm big on kind of staying with kind of old school technology. I like to learn about new technology. I can like design, develop new technology, but for my own personal use, I like to keep things simple.
So that's what I find interesting. Is like you have such a large interest in it's like how can I make it better? How can I make
Yep.
the next best thing? But I'm not going to use it. If it was me, I'd be like, well, I made it. I want to be the first one to use it.
Yep.
So do you get ridiculed for that?
People give me a little bit of a hard time sometimes, but it's okay. It's all in good spirit.
I mean, it's all just your personal flavor and taste, really. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's like, I mean, just this thing is it can call, text, take pictures, upload to wherever. It's like I could record this podcast on there
Yeah, exactly.
and upload it to YouTube, wherever. So I don't know. It's like, do you not care about the convenience that it has, or?
Yeah, I think it's more of I like to stay kind of grounded to make myself kind of use my own like head, right? Like being engaged with trying to be connected with the world. And I find that if you kind of, for myself, overuse technology, perhaps certain parts of thinking just kind of turn off, which I prefer not to have happen.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's just like, I do think a lot of people are getting, it's becoming more of a cyborg world where it's like, you know, you're catching a Cyride bus or whatever, people are on their phone, whatever, you on the bus, people are on their phone. There's no really just human-to-human interactions anymore. It's like, nothing's like a random conversation anymore. It's like, you even hardly, well, I don't know. You might talk to like if you go get groceries where you might have a conversation with the cashier or you might check out yourself.
Yeah, and I'm someone that I try my best to avoid like auto checkout. I try to make myself go through manual cashiers so I can interact with people.
Yeah.
Yep. It's interesting because when I came through college, that's when kind of this cell phones in general were starting to become big. I recall like my sophomore year going to the airport and is looking at people, and throughout my whole trip, I might see like one or two people who had like a flip phone like I had. Just any type of phone at all that they could be portable. And then the next year, instead of seeing one or two, I saw like 5 or 6. The next year, I saw like 20. And the next year, I saw like 100. So it was like weird kind of going through that transition of people going from having no communication device at all to now all these smart devices and stuff.
So what do you think about the saying that goes, the more technology we have, the more we're connected. However, on the other side, it's like you're not connected to anything. You know, it's like if you're so involved with your phone, it's like, how are you connected to anything?
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's a difference, I think, in my mind between the quantity of being connected and the quality of being connected. Yeah, so true with your smartphone, you're connected to almost like everything, but how deeply are you connected with anything, right? So I prefer to be someone that if I'm going to connect with something or someone, to be a little deeper connections.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of how I'm leaning towards. Almost like the dopamine addiction economy is ridiculous with these things. It's like maybe that's why you don't. Maybe you're the smartest one out there. It's like you're just like I don't even need to get into it.
Well, I'm also stubborn, so it's probably part of that also.
Yeah. Well, you can think that. Really, it's like it could be. Some people call it a curse, but it's like really, if that's saving you from getting addicted to being on your phone, you're able to go have more meaningful relationships with people or go do the things you want to do. They're just getting sucked in watching YouTube all day or whatever. But are you worried about technology increasing at all?
I think like all of humanity, all of the time of humanity, it's always been a challenge of can society keep up with the technology? And when there's a gap between what society can handle versus technology, that's when things that are not so good start happening, right? So, for example, with all the social media, we're definitely seeing places where, especially with children, perhaps not being as prepared to socially interact across many people who might be thinking differently, right? So if you think like before the internet, you might grow up in a small town, and when you're socially interacting, you're learning how to interact with people who kind of have very similar values and ways of looking at the world. And that makes it a little easier for you to kind of form your own way of thinking about things. But if you too quickly go from that mode to now you're exposed to all these different things, and now you have your parents who perhaps were in a different era, that kind of disconnect, I think it takes time for humans to adapt to. So I'm a little concerned that the speed at which technology is connecting us is outpacing the speed at which us as humans can kind of adapt to it.
Yeah.
I think if we can catch up, I think it's a great thing. But I think during that transition time, that's when it's a little tricky.
What do you think needs to happen for humans to catch up?
That's the question. If I could answer, I'd probably get some type of Nobel Prize.
Yeah, probably.
That's a tricky one. I think in the end, though, I think it's about this just being aware, right? Just being aware and being willing to have views that you feel strongly about, but then also having the ability to bring in new information. And if that new information conflicts with kind of what you thought the world was about, being able to adjust to it, right? And I think that's something that I'm not sure how you would teach that at a young age, but it's kind of like learning to share and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Something you have to kind of get into the system of things you teach children.
Yeah, it's like you want to be a solidified individual. However, you also want to be able to have the ability to introduce new ideas to your life.
Exactly.
How can you learn from other people? How can you help them? How can they help you? And that's really just how you grow as a person.
Yep.
But so I guess you started working here at 2008, right?
Yep.
So speaking of just social media technology on phones, do you think, just because you've probably been seeing like groups of people working together and collaborating over the years, would you say technology has helped or destroyed it?
I know from the perspective of like, from teaching perspective, I think technology has been a massive help. Like I know when the pandemic hit, that I greatly started using Discord, and Discord was like amazing for being able to kind of survive through the online learning process. And one of the benefits was that now that we're back in person, I still greatly have like the same Discord servers I had for like 288 and 488, and I really try to have my students really interact over Discord so that when they're not in the lab, they still can interact with each other, even if they're like on different sides of the country on vacation or something. So I think technology has been very beneficial from a teaching perspective and allowing teams to interact. Now, the kind of big difference, I think, between kind of using Discord for a class versus like the open internet is that Discord for a class is kind of like very structured, right? You're going to that server for a very specific reason to accomplish things in the real world, right? So it's very, very nicely structured for supporting that. While the internet's kind of like, almost like the Wild West of stuff, right? Like, who knows where you're going to go? Who knows what the internet's going to push into your direction? So it's a kind of different use model, I guess.
So why not like Slack or something more, business professional? Because like originally, my current employer who I TA for, I don't know if you know Dr. Rush, but she's like very pro Slack. And as TAs, I'm trying to be like, all the students have Discord already. They're not going to have to download Slack.
Yeah. And in the end, it's kind of like for a certain problem you're trying to solve in terms of connecting students, there are a lot of technologies out there. And for me, around the time when kind of COVID hit, myself plus my other professors were looking at Discord and Slack and stuff, and we just found for our personal use, it seemed personal preference, Discord seemed to be closer to the features of the time that would promote being able to teach online. Like I'm not sure back in 2020 if like Slack had a really nice way for you to share your screen and stuff like that, have voice channels and stuff like that. So the features in Discord just seem to be in the right place at the right time to take off. And then what you learn in a platform, usually you might get kind of fixed to that and not want to have to move right way and learn a new platform.
Did you ever teach class over Discord or?
Oh, yeah. 288 was taught over Discord, or not taught over Discord. So I had a combination of Zoom plus Discord working together.
Nice.
So there's a question that did I use Discord or did I teach online, I guess? What was your question?
I didn't know if you actually held lectures in like the voice channels of Discord.
Yeah. So typically I use Zoom for doing the actual lecture. And so what I'll do often is that if students are working things in the lab in the evening and they want to share their screen with me, then I can go to the voice channel in Discord and have a conversation with them. And then once I'm done with that group, I can go to the next group to a voice channel. So it's kind of a nice way to have more kind of one-on-one interactions. And I use Zoom kind of for like the big lecture type style things.
Yeah. Do you still use Discord to help people in the labs, or?
Yep. This morning and last night around probably 7 p.m., I just kind of go into Discord. I have each lab group has its own private text channel and their own public voice channel, so that if teams want to share their code with each other, they can do it in the private chat channel. But if they want to get like help from their peers over a voice channel, everyone can kind of go into everyone else's voice channel.
That's neat.
Yeah, so my TAs, I am very big on using Discord and stuff even during in person because this gives a nice way to be able to interact outside of class. And as you know, for 288, you spend a lot of time doing stuff out of class.
Yeah, I'd say that's 80% of the time spent.
Yep.
At least. I mean, just for some people, like fortunately, I had a really awesome partner, and I was just like the little ear on his shoulder. I'm like, okay, well, if we just try this little fix here. He was just like the workhorse, and I was just like, I'm just making sure we're following the guidelines, we're in the scope, everything's correct. I was the data collector and making sure the equations were all right and stuff. But the really cool thing is, like, once I fortunately had like a group of 6 for the final project, and everyone was like a really solid member and everything, so that was really sweet. It was probably my best project I've ever done in college, and it's so advanced where it was like we didn't do the autonomous thing because I feel like that was like just very, very advanced, and we wanted to do all the other small things first. We had the GUI. We also had interchangeable data sets, and I was telling Ivan about this. He's like, yeah, you probably could have argued extra credit for that, even though we already got 115% or whatever the final thing was. But it was really cool just to be like, okay, well, Roomba 6 is being taken. Let's just use Roomba 2 since we know we have data sets for that. We just comment out the Roomba 6 data sets, and then we were like, okay, here's Roomba 2.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was probably the coolest thing because that actually did happen when it came to the final thing, and getting that all to correlate with a Python GUI we created and getting to drive it was really neat. Like, because we even had it, if it bumped something, it would let out a beep, or if it hit a white line, it'd let out a beep, or if one of the cliff sensors got, it was like, oh, there's the whole beep. So it's like, it was very nice to be like, because I know you were like, okay, well, here's the extra data sheet stuff where we didn't even touch in the class that you can incorporate in your final project to help you. I thought that was awesome. I thought it was a very well-structured class. I don't know how much you've changed it over the years from when you started.
It's been changed quite a bit, yeah, especially on the project side, to give you guys more flexibility to kind of play with technology. Like you said, some of the classes that's been your hardest classes you've kind of liked a lot, and that's kind of like the best kind of, I think, praise a professor can give is that if they see on a evaluation report, this is one of the hardest classes I taught, but one of my favorite classes. Like that's kind of the good balance. Like you're using your brain, but you're enjoying the kind of going through the process.
Yeah. No, it helps when you have a professor there that's like, if you need help, don't even wait like 10 minutes. That's just like, why just ask it now? Just keep going forward. And so like another professor, Dr. Dewey, I don't think there's anyone else that could have taught 3-1 better than him. I know Burke is also highly accoladed as well. I just didn't have him. I just had Dewey. But I know this is going to sound good, but I hated 381. But I got through it because of Dewey. So it's like having professors like him or like you or Burke, whoever, having that personal connection with the professor. Like I even remember I emailed you, I'm like, hey, I have the smart home idea, whatever, and all these sensors and stuff we're using in class. It's like I'm kind of envisioning it now how I can start to do this. I haven't done anything yet because I'm trying to just get through college first. But it's still a cool, interesting idea to me. But it's also like, this is right. I want to do embedded systems, so it's like that's why I'm applying at VAE and looking at IBM stuff like that. But yeah, I guess thank you for setting me on embedded system.
I'm happy that you found your passion. That's what I think professors all should aim to do is get students on the right path to be doing things they're passionate about.
Yeah. So I guess for students who want to get into embedded systems that are maybe a sophomore, junior, not a senior yet, what would you suggest to them to just strengthen their embedded system skills? Just other than, I mean, you can do personal projects and stuff, but it's like, I feel like that's just kind of like a given, but it's like, where would you recommend somebody to start?
Yeah, so outside of kind of personal projects, like I said, that's kind of a given. Like if you want to do embedded
Yeah.
systems, there's lots of platforms like Arduino out there, Raspberry Pis out there to start playing with
Yeah.
the technology, right? Um, so if you haven't taken 288, definitely 288 is a class that most people in our department have to take, so you'll eventually take that. But what I would say, no matter what path you take, learning how to learn is important. And that's a very weird phrase to say in a sense. Actually, when I didn't mention this, but during my summer after my junior and senior year of high school, I interned at a naval air base. And I was an apprentice to an electrical engineer. In my junior year, my mentor told me that the most important thing you'll learn from college is to learn how to learn. And when I was a junior in high school, I thought to myself, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. I'm a junior in high school. I'm like in the top 2% of my class. I clearly know how to learn. And then I got into college and did very well my freshman year, getting like A's on all my exams. I had a friend that I was an electrical engineer with. He was getting A on his exams. Then sophomore year, I started getting B's on my exams. My friend was still getting A's. And my sophomore year, I was starting to get C's on my exams, and he was getting A's. And I was like, something is wrong here. I was like, something has to change. And it turned out that my friend actually was very good at learning, like learning how to learn. And I had a pretty big gap in how to do that. I kind of adapted his strategy, which was a very systematic way of learning, which he called the DAD or AD approach. So DAD would be write down all the definitions of the terms, then write down assumptions you find in the textbook, and then you can derive everything else. And I started like really taking that to heart my junior year to kind of learn how to learn. And that same process applies to embedded systems where if you're going to learn how to use them for real, you have to learn how to read a data sheet. And if you're going to really learn to read a data sheet, you need to be able to figure out, okay, what are the definitions of the terms in the data sheet? What are some of the assumptions being made, like how fast the clock need to be? And then you kind of can derive things from there. So this idea of really learning how to be comfortable with taking textbooks and things that are written and extract information out in a systematic way, I think will take you a long way in embedded systems or whatever realm of technology you want to go into.
Yeah, I think that was really excellently said. I mean, there's so many different things you can do out there. Like, obviously, you can do your personal projects, but getting involved with these classes and just trying to even just read a data sheet. I mean, the cool thing about 288 was like, you're like, if you have a question, just look at the data sheet. I mean, literally everything's there. It's 1,000 pages, but it's 1,000 pages because everything you need is there.
Yep.
But it's like, it can be really, I remember my first time opening the PDF, I'm like, what the heck, man? I'm like, I'm getting in over my head here. But it paid off because, like, once you really, like, by lab 4 or 5, it's like, you know what the bitwise functions are. It's like,
Yep.
So that was kind of like the cool thing. It's like you're initializing and then you're getting to, be like, okay, well, here's kind of like the data sets I'm working with. How can I normalize this into something,
Yep.
human readable, or well, how can I use this?
Yep. And that's the only things I tried to get across in my 288 class is that when we first start the class, I usually try to say that you'll have this 1,000-page data sheet. Then open it up. I'll be like, if you have not seen a data sheet before, you will be overwhelmed. That's a given. In the status, don't be afraid to dive in and ask for help as you are struggling through stuff. And as you probably found that it's a 1,000-page data sheet, but typically for any given project, you only care maybe about 20 or 30 pages at most, typically, right? So just being able to figure out what's important versus what's not important.
Yeah, that's why I always liked like the little quizzes you gave in classes, like, hey, go find this on a data sheet. Tell me how you'd initialize this to perform this function. Because then you're forcing the students, like, okay, not only are they figuring out how to do it, but they're also learning how to read a data sheet and how to find what they need to find.
Yep.
So that was kind of the cool thing that I thought was nice in that class, because like you're teaching them the subject and you're also teaching them how to learn in a very kind of niche field.
Yeah, and as I've been developing 288, that's been one of my driving kind of back of my mind. It's not been so much how do I teach embedded systems, but I really try to think of how can I incorporate into my class how to teach students how to learn. And I think in my mind, any course I teach, and ideally any course any teacher teaches, it should be the class should give the students an opportunity to learn how to learn. even if like learning the actual material is like a high objectives, but equally high should be giving them a chance to learn how to learn. Because a lot of students might go through all 4 years. It might not be into that very last semester of their senior year, it clicks how to learn. But if they're given opportunities like every single semester, it increases the probability that they don't go through college and not learn that. Because a lot of people get through college and they don't learn that skill set. I mean, it happens quite a bit.
Yeah. See, I don't know. It's like I feel like I relate to you a little bit with high school. It's like I didn't even really try. I just, I graduated like a 3.85 or something like that. Then I came to college. I mean, community college it's high school 2.0, but coming to Iowa State and then I took differential equations, I'm like, slow the ball.
Yep.
We got to figure something out here. But then, I mean, I got the dean's list a couple times, but then it's like 381. I just took too much with 381. I was taking ComS 309, CPRE 381, then 3 other courses, and then a part-time job. And so it's like I didn't get A's in any of those classes because but I think another important thing, and maybe you disagree or agree with this, is it's important to know how much you can take on in college.
It's extremely important. Like for myself, I was definitely someone that always tried to push myself in terms of courses, and I didn't mention this, but also in undergrad, I was on the university's men's gymnastics team. So I worked out 20 hours a week practicing for gymnastics. So I had a very tight schedule. And my junior year, I took a set of courses that my freshman year I had a senior advised me, they're like, be careful what courses you take in what order, and definitely don't take these 3 courses at the same time. In my junior year, first semester, I'm like, I can handle those 3 courses all at the same time, plus these other 2 courses that are equally as hard. So I fully overloaded myself, and I definitely was hurting at the end of that semester. Like I had to take a breather semester the next semester, and I really dialed back all my courses to recover. I wiped myself. Now the good thing is I the hard way kind of found my boundary. And the thing is, once you find that boundary, if you kind of attack it properly, once you recover, you find you can push things a bit further, or at least know that you could probably push further than you grew some, but you still not to push too hard, right? So that's sometimes you have to learn the hard way where your boundaries are, where your skill sets are.
Yeah. Just because you failed doesn't mean you can't learn from it.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the most beautiful sayings. But we're wrapping up with at 2:55 here. Is there any last statements you want to get out? Anything you want to be known for? Or any advice?
I really liked your questions about kind of that led to the kind of learning how to learn. So I think the biggest thing I like, either with college or outside of college, is really try to go after things you're passionate about. And once you find something you're passionate about, really try to zero in on what's that process in that realm for learning within that realm. And not being afraid to kind of dive in and put the time in to kind of learn things and reach out for help.